My name is Colleen Miller. I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Brantford-Brant, and your moderator today. Our chamber is pleased to be the community producer of this program in partnership with Rogers TV. This election comes at a pivotal time for our country, and the longer than usual writ period provides ample time for those who want to lead our community to have meaningful dialogue with the citizens of Brant. I congratulate all of the candidates on their commitment to our community and for their leadership in seeking the opportunity to represent Brant in Ottawa. The candidates joining us this evening are Phil McColeman, Conservative Party of Canada, Marc Laferriere, New Democratic Party, Danielle Takacs, Liberal Party of Canada, and Rob Ferguson, Libertarian Party. Kevin Brandt, the Green Party candidate, was not able to join us due to a scheduling conflict. Our panelists this evening are Michael Allan Marion of the Expositor, Allan Lovett representing the Chamber of Commerce Brantford-Brant, and Sean Allen of the Brant News. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make their opening remarks. The order of speaking was determined by a random draw. The panelists will be alternating posing questions. Each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to each question, and again, a 2-minute time limit will be imposed. In the instance of one candidate making a specific reference to another candidate, the candidate will be allowed a 45-second rebuttal. Each candidate will be allowed 1 minute for closing remarks, and the speaking order will be in reverse to the opening remarks. The timekeeper will indicate when the candidates have 15 seconds remaining to speak and when they have reached their maximum time allowed. In case of a challenge, the decision of the moderator will be final. I would ask the candidates to please adhere to the agreed upon format and exercise professional decorum throughout the debate. Thank you, and we will begin with the candidates' opening remarks. Our first candidate to speak will be Phil McColeman.
Well, thank you and good evening. Thanks to Rogers and the Chamber for hosting this. Serving as your Member of Parliament since 2008 has been a wonderful experience, and I've been very fortunate to serve in what I would call a very unique political ecosystem here in Brantford-Brant. Working alongside our Member of Provincial Parliament, the mayors of Brantford and Brant County, and the chiefs of 6 nations and the Mississaugas of the New Credit has been a wonderful experience, and it's because of the way that our local elected officials have chosen to set aside partisanship when it comes to our local priorities. We work incredibly well together in a nonpartisan way to achieve great results in our communities. It's a formula that is unique to Brantford-Brant, and it's a formula that works. The real, tangible, and meaningful results are all around us. Our local economy is on the upswing, posting impressive numbers driven by the strength of our manufacturing and processing sectors. Revitalization is in full steam ahead in downtown Brantford, supported by over $35 million in new federal investments. Sites that were left polluted and ignored, like the Greenwich Mohawk Lake District, are being cleaned up and primed for exciting redevelopment with $14 million in federal support. Major infrastructure projects in Brant County and on 6 nations are improving the quality of life for residents with over $50 million in federal support driving these projects forward. These initiatives have been moving forward because of the way we've been able to work together to achieve results. And partnerships are the key to our success. Together, we are building on our community's success story, and on October the 19th, I am asking for your support so that I can keep delivering results that keep the success going in Brantford-Brant.
Thank you, Phil. We will now move on to Marc Laferriere.
Thank you so much, Colleen, and thank you to the Chamber, my fellow candidates at Rogers TV, and those of you watching at home. My name is Marc Laferriere. I have been a social worker locally in this community. I have been a college professor locally, a small business owner locally, and I've worked for some great organizations like Laurier Brantford, the Grand River Community Health Center, and Woodview Children's Mental Health. I grew up in Eagle Place, and I live in the county of Brant with my wife, Rebecca, and we're expecting our first child that we're going to raise here in Brantford-Brant, proudly. And I'm going to stand up for that child, and I'm going to stand up for you. That's why I'm doing this in the riding, and why I'm working so hard to become your next MP. I've been standing up and making sure this community is heard, day in and day out, locally for years. When I'm at the doors and when I'm in the community, it's you who tell me what to stand up for. It's you who tell me what to fight for. And what are you saying? You're saying that you want good jobs. For you, for your kids, for your loved ones. You're saying that you want health care that works. Where you have a doctor, where your medicines are covered through pharmacare, and where you have access to the services you and your loved ones need. You say you want life to be more affordable, to be able to make ends meet. When it comes to things like childcare, gas prices, heat and hydro, you want to stop being dinged. And you want a government that listens, a government that lives within its means, that understands that excess, fraud, and scandal are not the way to go. No one in this election has worked harder for that kind of change. And we've never been as close as we are to making it happen. On October 19th, you have a choice between the status quo and change. We know what the option for status quo is. And there's a false change out there, one that will say anything to get your vote, one that moves with the poll, flips one day and flops the other. On the other hand, there's the NDP, and we can make history this election with your vote on October 19th.
Thank you, Marc. And now Danielle.
I'm Danielle, and I want to be your voice here and in Ottawa. Before questions are asked of us candidates, I'd like to ask you, do you feel you have a voice advocating for you and your family in Ottawa? Are you better off now than 10 years ago than when we last had a Liberal government? Is our economy thriving like it used to? Or have we taken steps back? It is time to invest in people. It is time to invest in our communities, our social safety net, and our infrastructure. We have a plan that works and which works now. We do not have time for a plan that is dependent on majority governments and 8 years into the future. So I ask you, are you better off than 10 years ago? And do you believe a word of what Stephen Harper tells you these days? My question now for the other parties is this: what are your plans for the next 2 years for our economy and people? Because we could be back here in an election again in 2 years' time. Our voters deserve to know as honestly as possible what they'll get from their next government, not the one after that or the one after that. In the next 2 hours, I will share with you what Liberals will do in the next 2 years and how I can deliver for your priorities as your representative and voice. I am proud to have been actively involved in Brantford-Brant throughout my entire life. Whether it's been through downtown committees, Paris Kiwanis, or the villages, I believe in working hard to make us stronger. I'm running because this community has given me so much that I'm thankful for, and I want to give back to it. My career has brought me to work at all 3 levels of government and across party lines to get good things done. It's taken me to where political decisions are made, and I want us at those tables.
Thank you, Danielle. And now we'll move on to Rob.
I'd like to thank another opportunity to actually appear before the community. My name is Rob Ferguson. I'm the Libertarian Party of Candidates candidate for Brantford-Brant Riding. I have served as a candidate in 3 provincial elections, 2 municipal elections, and this is my first national campaign. I own a small business in marketing and advertising, assisting smaller businesses here in our community. I see national issues from a unique perspective. I see it from a business, from a political, and from a professional perspective. I've always been a rights and freedoms individual, and this is why my heart is with the Libertarians. We often get asked why we run, and you'll clearly hear tonight that all of us feel that we can do the best for this community. That's one of the reasons we run. Libertarians are big on freedom and small on government. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rob. At this time, we will begin the questions, and the first person to respond to question number 1 will be Marc Laferriere.
One of the largest issues across the riding of Brantford-Brant is the Stephen Harper government's refusal to reopen land claims negotiations with 6 nations since they were called off 5 years ago. A tri-council delegation of 6 nations Brantford-Brant councillors led by Brantford and Brant mayors Chris Friel and Ron Eddy and elected chief Ava Hill has gone to Ottawa twice to try to persuade MPs from 3 major parties to get the talks going again. They say the lack of negotiation and resolution is holding up development for all 3 communities. The Chamber of Commerce, Brantford-Brant, has also raised the same concerns. What would you and your party, Marc, do to address Six Nations land claims, and would you try to facilitate the reopening of claims negotiations?
Thank you for the question. I do think it's very important to make sure that we actually move the ball up the field when it comes to this issue. We have to take a respectful nation-to-nation approach, and we have to hit the ground running. When we talk about what we can do, we've already been doing it. There's no candidate on this stage that has brought more MPs to Six Nations to hear their concerns, and there's no candidate on this stage that has spent as much time listening in that community. There are some things that have been done when it comes to wastewater and other infrastructure issues, but on core issues with Six Nations, especially on land claims, though we've heard it's a #1 priority, it's rarely mentioned in the House of Commons, if ever. There have been some meetings in the past, but these meetings happen with a very strict guideline. It's not really negotiation when you come in and say there's a cap on what we can negotiate. Instead, what we would do is open negotiations. We've already begun meeting with the Tri-Council, as you mentioned, and working so that if elected, we can hit the ground running. We need some change when it comes to this, and Liberal and Conservative governments haven't got it done when it comes to Six Nations and land claims. We think it's time for somebody else to take a stab at it.
Thank you very much, Marc. We will move on to Danielle's response.
I think there's no better party than the Liberal Party of Canada than to deal with this issue. Personally, I believe that this is the legacy that Justin Trudeau wants to leave, is a renewed partnership with Six Nations, and that's all-encompassing. It's not just on land claims. I'm a little bit tired throughout this campaign of hearing how many people have been brought here or what they've done in their years between elections, because I only found out a year ago that I was going to be a candidate. But in that time, I've worked hard to bring myself up to date and educated, and also bring other people from the Liberal Party here to know that this is a priority for me should I become MP. But the Liberal Party hasn't forgotten it. In the past 4 years, Carolyn Bennett, our Aboriginal Affairs critic, has been here 5 times. Paul Martin was here. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's been here or how many meetings we've had. What matters is what is a party, how committed is a party to resolving land claims and having a renewed commitment. Our plan is to, number one, restore the Kelowna Accord and open up negotiations, and do that with the full understanding and the respect and the input of First Nations communities on how they want to negotiate and have a new relationship with us. The other thing that has to be done is the cap on how much a land claim can be has to be lifted. You're never going to have any meeting unless that is lifted. We have to stop fighting people in court to not have a resolution as well. What we need is new leadership in order for this to happen. We can't have more Weston's breads going down the roads because they're afraid to come in and invest in Brantford. Chief Hill is absolutely right. This is wrong. It's preventing economic opportunities for all parties involved.
Thank you, Danielle. And Rob?
Our home and native land. I didn't write it, but it basically answers native land disputes. It's our home, and it's their land, all of it. The actuality and the reality is we have to work together, provincially, municipally, and federally. It always seems that when it comes to the land disputes, there's a party missing, and all parties need to be at the table of resolution in order to have resolution. Now, the Libertarian Party has a couple planks that may ease some of the tensions. One of which is to end systematic discrimination to Indigenous people, and it's one of those fundamental things that how do you trust a government when they're continuing their regulations continue to infringe on your rights and freedoms and your family and your business, and to end obligation and restriction on Indigenous people. It's one of those things where we need to let them live their life in accordance to their own ways on their land. But again, we need to work at a resolution with all levels of government. And if one of those levels of government is missing, we'll never have a resolution. On October 19th, I'm prepared to sit at that table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. We'll move on to Phil.
Well, thank you for the question. It's an important one. It's important, too, that I emphasize what has been maintained in terms of an excellent working relationship with Six Nations. We've worked together on their infrastructure needs, building the water treatment plant, $39 million. We've worked to help them invest tens of millions in skills training. We've worked to help them build a brand new police station, a world-class lacrosse field, and we've worked together on projects of joint nature such as the cleanup of Mohawk Lake. But on land claims, let me clarify the record so that the preamble to your question is clarified. It has been my top priority, one of my many top priorities for this community. And I hosted meetings, first of all with the former Chief of Six Nations, Mr. Chief Montour. We hosted the Tri-Council in Ottawa, but more so, I've arranged face-to-face meetings with the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Six Nations negotiators last October. The Minister wrote as a follow-up letter to Six Nations, which stated in writing that Canada wishes to return to the negotiating table. We have not said that we are prepared to close down negotiations. We're doing everything we can to arrange negotiations. And the culmination of those efforts was a quiet meeting that I organized in Toronto between Canada's chief negotiator, and Six Nations negotiators to map out a framework. It was at that meeting that Six Nations drew a line in the sand, telling Canada that they would only discuss a potential agreement on their terms. And the two most significant points on those terms were this: ongoing payments to Six Nations in perpetuity. And the second one was no discussion of extinguishing the land claims after settlement, which is the very basis of a land claim settlement. Our government has settled over 390 land claims. The single largest one, specific land claims in this riding, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, $145 million.
Thank you very much, Phil. We'll move on now to question number 2, Allan Lovett from the Chamber of Commerce, Brantford-Brant, and our question will be directed to Danielle first.
Thanks, Colleen. Before I get started, I'd like to thank all the candidates for being here today on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce and our member businesses. I think this is very important for our members, our viewers at home, to get to know a little bit about you and to hear a little bit about what your parties stand for. So again, thank you for being here, and if I can move into the question. Our membership and the business community at large puts high priority on balanced budgets. At the same time, we do realize that there's huge infrastructure deficits, skills that need to be invested in, and a competitive tax regime that will attract business to our community and country. That being said, how do you prioritize spending versus balancing your books? And what kind of priority does your party put on a balanced budget?
Well, let me be very straightforward and honest with you. Number one, the Liberal Party of Canada very much believes and achieves balanced budgets. We will have a balanced budget, but we know to get a balanced budget, you need to invest money to make money. And I don't think the other parties appreciate that to do that right now. And that has to happen so that we can have jobs in the future, money, retirement, etc. Balancing the books has cost us jobs and helped us to put us into today's recession. There's no denying that we have the worst growth in the G7 and the only G7 nation that is back into recession now. The LPC is being upfront and honest, the Liberal Party of Canada. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. We do believe in having a modest deficit in times which call for modest deficits when interest rates are low and when we have a $2 trillion economy. We're going to invest in people so that they can go back to work and make money, which will go back into our economy and small businesses. This will also attract business investment, and it will ensure a stable growth that is also predictable and is also working with municipalities. We have a 3-point plan that will bring relief to families to invest and also for people and companies to invest in our Canada and our municipalities. In 2 years, we are going to invest $10.2 billion. That's the 2 years that I'm planning and talking about. The other parties are talking about planning down the line. We will also balance the budget when it's responsible to do so. The bottom line is balanced books sometimes cost jobs, and we want to invest and create a new Canada that's going to be exciting and has opportunity in the future for everybody.
Thank you, Danielle. Rob?
Big government has big budgets. And a simplified budget equals a simplified government. Government simply doesn't have any money. It's not their money. Their bank accounts are all zero. It's your money. It's small businesses' money. It's my money. And we should start looking at it that way, that it's our money. When we look at my opponent's budgets, we see 35, 50, 100-page budgets. A Libertarian budget's around 2 pages, simplified. It's, again, by simplifying government, simplifying the money, simplifying the need, and returning some of these liberties back to the individual, we can save tens of billions of dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Phil?
This question really drives at a matter of balance. And let me describe what our government has been doing. We've invested in infrastructure at an unprecedented pace. If I was to compare it to Danielle and her Liberal government of 9 years prior to our government of 9 years, the Liberal government invested just over $3 billion. The Conservative government that I've been able to serve in has invested over $12 billion, 3 times as much. And last year we launched the new Building Canada Plan, which is the largest long-term federal investment in infrastructure in Canadian history, $53 billion over 10 years. Combined with other federal investments, this is $70 billion for infrastructure. But infrastructure at the cost of balancing a budget is not the proper balance. We need to have balanced budgets. When times are good, as they are now, we need to balance the budget year after year. So we must work infrastructure expenditures into a balanced budget plan, which we have committed to do. And the way that we believe you grow the economy, you continue to raise revenues at the federal level, and you balance the budget is we keep taxes low for the job creators. These are the people who are in small business, medium-sized business, and large business. If I were to take some local employers who would be affected greatly by the other party's plans for raising taxes, such as Patriot Forge on Henry Street, they have calculated that their taxes could go up as much as $7,000 per employee should the federal government impose a carbon tax in this country, something that's being contemplated by the opposition parties.
Thank you, Phil. And Danielle, you have a 40-second, a rebuttal?
Do we do it right now?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I'm going to go back to my first question opening the debate. Are you better off than 10 years ago under a Liberal government than under Stephen Harper? And do you believe Stephen Harper's economics and his numbers? And when it comes to the NDP as well, you look at their governments of Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan, they're in deficit as well. As Justin Trudeau said in the debate, you call for good deficits, but you run deficits in all years except election years.
Thank you, Danielle. Marc.
Thanks for the question. Balanced budgets are important. The Liberals talk about the next 2 years, but what happens in the third year and the fourth year, or the 30th year, or whatever other year you're looking at? When we put spending on our kids' credit cards, that's a kind of cowardice, to be frank, and it's not good for our economy. What happened with Liberal governments in the past was they ran these deficits, and in order to balance the budget, they raided the eye. They cut affordable housing spending completely, and we're still paying for a lot of those missteps. Putting it on the credit card of our kids doesn't make sense. It's not financially viable, and it means programs cut later, programs that we need. When it comes to balance in the economy, I agree. That's why we want to cut the small business tax in 2 years instead of 4 years, such as the Conservatives have talked about. We want to invest long-term in infrastructure. There's nothing wrong with long-term thinking. Ed Broadbent once told me that the problem with politicians is that they think over 4 years instead of over 40, and I happen to agree with that. And we need to invest in people, in childcare and pharmacare that actually save us money in the long run and in the short term. And I think those are really great options. We also do need to make some cuts. So we're going to cut the corporate tax loophole for stock options. We're also going to raise the corporate tax rate 2%, but we're going to lower the small business tax rate by 2%. These are things that will help put things into balance, and it'll help our economy in the long run, because the majority of jobs that are created, new jobs in the last 10 years, have been from small businesses, while big corporations have sat on that money. Now, there's nothing wrong with cutting some taxes for corporations. What we'll do instead is we'll tie that to investment, to hiring, to the things we want, to going green. This makes a lot more sense than these across-the-board tax cuts that Liberals and Conservatives have done over the last 35 years that have led to many, many issues in our economy and have led to a lack of balance in our economy for hardworking people.
Thank you, Marc. We'll move on now to our third question with Sean Allan from the Brant News.
I'm going to just echo Allan and thank the candidates for being here, but I also want to say a hat tip to the Chamber and Rogers TV for hosting this. In my opinion, there aren't enough debates, and this one in particular allows the most people in the riding to see and hear you guys, and that's key. For the first question I'm going to ask tonight, word it like this. Well, many Canadians are looking forward to retirement. Many are looking forward to it with some trepidation. There's many acronyms with which the government can shape policy for, just to throw out a few of them, CPP, OAS, GIS, RRSP, TFSA. The Ontario government has proposed to take some action on pension reform here, but where do you and your party come down when it comes to making sure Canadians can retire, and especially those middle-aged private sector workers that don't currently have a workplace pension to supplement their government pensions?
And Rob?
Again, when we look at our current structure, seniors who have worked all their life and paid into a pension plan, that's all they've got. And they can't make ends meet. And we can't make any more money. And we can't tax any more people. We can't give any more money. The circumstances is the cost of living. We need to bring down the cost of living so the pensions that they've saved for all their life can actually sustain their life and their lifestyle. The other element is we need to open up the markets when we talk about saving for retirement. Why should you be bound to pay the government at a certain rate, a high rate, and the over restriction when we can open up the market and have free choice to choose? Do I want that program at that interest rate for that duration with that coverage, or do I want to select a government plan where they tell me everything? Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Move on now to Phil.
Thank you, Colleen. This is an important question. We're hearing a lot at the door when I speak with seniors. We meet a lot of seniors during the daytime when we're canvassing. And I just want to go through the list of things that our government has done and will continue to work on and continue to improve for seniors. First of all, we introduced pension income splitting for seniors. That was a big deal for those seniors just retiring, two-couple families. We've just introduced through the campaign that there will also be benefits going to single seniors who are not able to take care of income splitting. And the numbers on income splitting are incredible. They're somewhere near 9 million people have taken advantage of income splitting as a vehicle to reduce their taxes. We've doubled the pension income credit for seniors. We've introduced the largest guaranteed income supplement. That's the GIS you were referring to. The first and largest increase in 25 years. We've doubled it. Those are for the people on the fringes. The people who qualify for GIS are the people who are struggling. And we know there are a lot of seniors in our community and in Canada who struggle. So we took a major step in increasing that. And we lowered taxes for seniors across the board, taking actually 400,000 lower income seniors off the federal tax rolls completely. They owe no tax in the future. And we increased the age limit for RSP and RRIF contributions. This was something I heard about a lot as your member of parliament. I had lots of delegations come and say, we have difficulty balancing our budgets when we get to the age of 71 and have to take out X amount of dollars. So we gave a cushion to that, and now it can go up to age 80 and people can manage their money better. In our 2015 budget, we lowered the RIF minimum withdrawal factors. We introduced the new home accessibility tax credit for seniors, and we doubled the annual contributions to tax-free savings account, which again, millions and millions of Canadians have taken advantage of.
Thank you very much. Marc.
When I worked as a local social worker, I would hear a lot of really troubling stories, especially from seniors. Seniors who had to choose between heat and meat in their groceries because of the lack of affordability, which is an issue that we're working on as well when it comes to the cost of food and home heating. And these things matter because your retirement pension, if you're lucky enough to have one, has to pay for a lot of things. When you're on a fixed income, it's getting harder and harder to do. And I know this firsthand, talking to so many. 2/3 of Canadians don't have a workplace pension. I'm 34 years old, and I'm one of the few people in my peer group that has one. And I wonder, well, what's going to happen in the future? Now, the Conservatives have done some unfortunate things, not related to helping folks with this. When you look at the OAS, moving that from 65 to 67 was a bad choice. When the Conservatives talk about us being such a strong economy during that time, and yet at the same time say, yeah, but even though we're a strong economy, we have to do this. It doesn't make sense. You can't say that to hard rock miners in Sudbury, that they're going to work for another 2 years, when a lot of factory workers and a lot of people in those types of professions are struggling to continue to work as it is. When you look at the OAS cut, and that's what it is, it's taking $13,000 out of seniors, out of their pockets. And I think that's a very poor decision to make. What we'll do is we'll lift the guaranteed income supplement to make sure that every senior who's living in poverty in this country is raised out of it. That would be about 200,000 seniors. That's a priority. That's one that makes sense, and it also helps seniors plan more appropriately. We'll also make sure that workplace pensions are protected when companies go bankrupt or leave, which is a major issue for many. And again, it shouldn't be this hard to retire. It shouldn't be this hard to get a pension. Both of those things need to be strengthened, and under an NDP government, they will be.
Thank you. Danielle.
Are our seniors better off than they were before? Sadly, I don't think so, and it's a growing population for us. I have one senior citizen lady on my campaign team, and she is there at our community office very often giving her time, but she tells me that unfortunately she is only able to eat once a day in order to make ends meet and look after her pet that she loves very much. And I'm glad that she's able to come to the office and have some good talking and some food to keep her warm in that way. I also want to make two facts very straightforward to you, that a Liberal government will keep tax-free savings accounts. We will keep them at $5,500 a year so that they can be best used for the most amount of people that are out there. We are also going to keep pension splitting for couples. Stephen Harper and the Finance Minister are raising the age of our seniors, not now, but for people like you and I, so that the seniors now don't think they have to vote on it. And they're passing off several economic issues, even the Finance Minister said, to our grandchildren. The Liberal Party of Canada wants to protect today's seniors and tomorrow's seniors. That is why we are going to bring back the age of the GIS back to 65. And we are also going to increase the guaranteed income supplement to about another additional $920 to lift seniors out of poverty. We're going to invest in affordable housing for seniors and make flexible and accessible EI compassionate care benefits. When it comes to an Ontario pension plan and enhanced CPP, we believe in that. It's the right thing to do, and it's the kind of Canada we want. If we don't help them this way, we will pay for it out of our tax dollars later in the future.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Michael Allan Marion from the Expositor, directed at Phil McColeman.
A major issue in the rural area is the need for an overhaul of infrastructure, from roads and bridges to the need for more broadband. This includes Brantford-Brant and Oxford ridings. Oxford riding now includes part of the former Burford Township. There are still areas of Brant County and Six Nations that don't have adequate access to the internet. There are bridges in need of rebuilding in Six Nations. The current funding programs can't adequately help them because they are too limited in scope or don't have enough money. The question is, what would you and your party do to improve these infrastructure needs?
I really appreciate this question because it drives on my initial comments from the outset, and that is the difference between a Conservative government and what we've been able to deliver for this community and other communities across the country. But in particular, Brant County, Six Nations, Mississaugas of the New Credit, and you're referring to the rural areas of our riding. The spending before we came to power was $3.4 billion on infrastructure, straight infrastructure, hard investments. Today, it is $12.3 billion in the last fiscal year. We have started the largest single investment in infrastructure in Canadian history with the Building Canada Fund at $53 billion. The gas tax funding alone in Brantford is just over $36 million. And the estimated gas tax funding to the county is $19 million since our government took office. If you look at some of the projects, and I'll refer to a couple of them that have been incredibly well received, are the road construction and resurfacing projects. Brant County Road number 16, an investment of $3.9 million by the federal government. Every time we meet as a group, the leaders, and we often meet for lunch together to discuss our priorities, infrastructure usually is part of the discussion. This has been a top priority as your member of parliament on my desk. I've made sure Brant and the city of Brantford have got their fair share from this federal government and the federal programs going forward. I intend to do the same if re-elected.
Thank you. And Marc?
The issue has been that the programs have been poorly managed, unfortunately. When you have the Build in Canada Fund, there's been many complaints about some of the deadlines and timelines for these projects. And when we had the massive stimulus spending, a lot of the issues with those were around exactly what you're talking about, Michael Allan. Things like internet not being really a part of it, looking at the old oil economy, and that was unfortunate as well. A lot of shovel-ready projects that are great for photo ops, but not necessarily the best use of our taxpayer dollars when it comes to job creation. And we've heard this again and again and again. It also caused overruns in some of our infrastructure projects, such as the Wayne Gretzky Centre, because of timelines that had to be adhered to in strict and specific ways. And these are issues. Canada's municipal infrastructure deficit is $172 billion and rising. And we can't blame the municipalities for that. They own 60% of our public infrastructure, but they only have 8% of the tax base to deal with that. We're glad that the government's offered some funding, but it shouldn't be this hard to ensure that Brantford-Brant, Six Nations, and New Credit have reliable infrastructure funding that they need. So we're going to take a penny from the gas tax, and we're going to make sure that, an existing penny, and we're going to make sure that that actually goes where it needs to go, with the municipalities in charge of that money, as opposed to the system we have now where the approval process can sometimes get in the way. An NDP government would also implement a better transit plan, and I know transit wasn't in your question, but transit's a very important issue when it comes to this. We need bus service from Six Nations and the county back into the city. We talk about the GO transit situation. One of the things we can do federally is make sure that we're GO ready. And in order to be GO ready, we need to make sure that public transit is available to Six Nations, New Credit, and the county of Brant, so that the amount of people who are eligible to get on the go increases. It can't just be folks who already have a car in Six Nations, New Credit, and the county of Brant. It needs to be public transit as well, and there are ways to do that, and I'd be happy to make that a priority as your MP.
Thank you. Danielle?
I think the campaign really took a different direction and people started looking at the Liberal Party of Canada again seriously when Justin Trudeau made his historic announcement on infrastructure. It was the largest commitment by a party leader to invest in infrastructure. And this is what we talked about earlier about timing to invest. This is the time to invest. Canada is a nation of creation. The last big thing that we created was probably the Confederation Bridge. Before that, maybe the rail lines. It is time to go back that and get jobs about it. The reality is the Conservatives have not designated their infrastructure plan in cooperation with provincial and municipal authorities, which have a lot to do with how these things are said. Our plan is going to rely on these levels of government to just tell us how these billions of dollars should be invested right away to create jobs immediately to do this. I would really be interested in hearing from Phil how he would propose a Conservative government would do this in the next 2 years, because as I said, the Liberal Party of Canada will be doing this immediately with an investment. And again, we are going to be contributing equally into infrastructure and into public transit. I've talked to the mayors about this and the Home Builders Association, who are extremely excited about this announcement because they know it is going to build homes, it is going to build affordable housing, and it's also going to help build roads, local water and wastewater facilities, which we desperately need in the county and on Six Nations.
Thank you, Danielle. And Rob?
Government needs roles. All three levels of government seem to be stepping on each other's footprints and overlapping each other. By simplifying government, giving government a role, all three tiers can actually save money and time. As it relates to transit, inter-county transit, it sounds like a great idea. But it seems to me that private enterprise has always been shut down. Why should it be a big corporation? Speaking of corporations, Libertarians would end corporate welfare. So that would, for communications, that would mean the big guys don't get that handout. Why should they get millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars when a local internet provider gets nothing? It's about equality. In order to end discrimination in the country of Canada, we need to end all forms of it. And our government continues to spend money into big corporations, and the small guy doesn't get nothing. Subsidies have always fascinated me, that the government will take $1 and give you 35 cents back and say, didn't we help? No, they didn't. Libertarians would rather you keep the $1 and be better off. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phil, you have a 45-second rebuttal.
Well, thank you very much. I think Danielle's question drove at what we would do in the next 2 years, I believe, on the front of infrastructure. Listen, trade is so important to this country. Building the job creation capabilities and creating jobs is a big thing. And let me relate just one quick story. A company called Hematite, which is here in Brantford, have gone from 25 employees to 175 employees in 5 short years because our government gave them a $500 million loan. No, I'm sorry, $500,000 loan, not $500 million, $500,000, which is totally repaid within the first 3 years. This is how targeted investments can work, and this is how government can best spend money to create jobs happening right here in our community. They've just bought another facility across the road. They're projecting
Phil.
500 jobs.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to our next question from Allan Lovett, directed at, Marc.
Thanks, Colleen. We've heard a lot about small business already, and I'd like to stick there. Small business really is the heart of our national economy, and here locally in Brant as well. We're hearing a lot of anecdotes from many small businesses who are apprehensive of growing at growth rates which are actually sitting in front of them because they fear the higher tax rates and what may come, lower subsidies and whatnot, from moving past the existing thresholds. My question is, would you support increasing the threshold for the lower small business tax rate from the $500,000 level up to, say, $1 million? And what other incentives do you and your party propose to help promote these small businesses, maybe such as lowered rates or staged thresholds moving forward on revenue?
So that question comes to me?
Yes, Marc.
Excellent. Well, small business is in my blood. I've been lucky enough to run a small business in town. My dad owned several small businesses, gas stations, breakfast and lunch restaurants. And my grandfather at one point or another owned every hotel on Colburn Street. And it taught me a lot of lessons, which I'm really happy about. Small business is the lifeblood of our economy. Again, 78% of the new jobs in the last 10 years have come from small business. And that's incredible piece of our local economy and our national economy. When we look at the things that we'll do right away, one of them is to lower the small business tax, again, by 2%, so it'll go from 11 to 9 in about 2 years instead of 4 years, as is being proposed by the Conservatives. We're also going to incentivize hiring with a hiring credit, because that's something that's very important, and we're going to stop the rampant credit card swipe fees. This is something that Jack Layton brought here in the first election announcement of the last campaign, saying we need a cap on those credit card swipe fees that are choking a lot of small businesses, unfortunately. When we look at the thresholds, I'd be open to that. Right now, that's not on the policy books, but I guess that's exactly why you have organizations like the CFIB and the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm happy to be a Chamber of Commerce member, to have those discussions to see what we can do in the fiscal room that we'll have to make sure we still have a balanced budget, that we still have things that are in a long-term capacity. The other thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to create a pharmacare program, and that'll help with any of those businesses that are looking to provide benefits, because it'll actually take some of that cost away. So we have to look at the costs that we're going to reduce. We're going to help reduce heating and hydro. We're going to help reduce the costs to pharmaceuticals, and we're also going to increase access to childcare, which will help create more jobs, and it'll help with making sure that the people that you want to come back to work are able to come back to work, even if they're doing their best that they can to be the best parents they can.
Thank you very much. Danielle.
Thank you. Yes, the Liberal Party of Canada does very much believe that small businesses are very crucial to the health of our economy and that they help contribute significantly to our economy and our base. I want to comment on something that Justin Trudeau said that I'm sure is raising a lot of questions about small businesses. And let me make it very clear as well that the Liberal Party of Canada under Justin Trudeau, but also under has the very similar position as with Charlie Angus of the NDP. They have both identified the same problem with small businesses, and they've actually both proposed a similar solution. The solution, though, what you're asking, is something that we have yet to work on. I think both parties, as has been stated, are looking into that, what it's exactly going to be. So hopefully within the next 3 weeks, we can get back to you on that. As well, and on that note, I just want to comment that Jack Mint, a respected economist, has said that 60% of the wealth from small businesses does go to individuals with wealth over $150,000, which we do consider probably not the middle class that we're targeting that needs the investment right now to grow our economy. So we do want to look at it. We want to make sure, though, it is right. And the Liberal Party has also been fighting the Conservatives on employment insurance premium hikes. These payroll taxes are killers for small, medium enterprises and the jobs that they create. When it comes to, I do want to go back to businesses, though. Recently, it was stated about corporate taxes, not small business taxes, but the corporate taxes, that the NDP plan for raising corporate taxes will probably cost 200,000 jobs. That's more people that's going to affect than its $15 minimum hourly wage.
Thank you, Danielle. Rob?
All this talk of taxes and money, Libertarians will introduce a 15% flat rate tax. Will increase the tax burden from $11,000 to $17,300. This actually makes the working poor tax exempt. More money in your pocket means you can spend more locally. To end all other federal tax and privatize some of the subsidies to allow for choice. When we look at the board parties, the blue, the orange, the red, and the green, they're all talking about overspending. One of the issues is raising the corporate tax. A lot of small businesses fear that. They truly do, because now their cost of goods and services goes up, which means that they have to charge the consumer, the constituent, more money to make. So, when we look at overall cost, we have to reduce that cost, and that is key to small business succeeding. That $10 two-piece fish deal with an NDP government will cost you $15. When we look at the minimum wage, we recently discussed this, and a lot of people here locally think it applies to them. It doesn't. It applies to government employees. It applies to government contracted employees. Those people who work at Ferrero, those people who work at Western Waffle, that have a sign on their front lawn, you haven't been lied to. It's just misleading. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phil?
Well, I'm glad we got to this topic, because this is something that distinguishes our government and our Conservative government over the opposition. And first of all, let me say, one of the first things we would do is do exactly as was mentioned, which is reduce the small business tax rate. But what is really quite interesting is when you look at the budgetary projections of the opposition parties, is they're projecting to increase EI premiums to employers and employees by a significant amount. So employers could expect to pay more. In the case of employees, for the average employee making about $60,000 a year, it will mean $1,000 off their paycheck that will go to the new EI program, which is essentially a payroll tax. So this is the plans of how they intend to balance the budget in the case of the NDP, and also with the Liberals. They have, before we even got the campaign started, the leader of the Liberal Party announced that he would mirror the pension scheme of the Ontario's Premier. So in other words, what he would do is he'd mirror that in Ottawa. Now what that means in terms of expenses for employers and employees, small, medium, and large, no distinction between them, would mean, again, another major increase to the cost of being small business. 26 years in my own small business. One of the biggest issues was red tape. Having to have people on staff. I employed about 20 individuals on the average year that I was in business. And the biggest thing that I had to do was hire a person just to deal with government red tape. We've brought in legislation to say, if you're going to bring in more red tape for small business to deal with, any businesses, you have to remove one of the other regulations in order to make it at least a leveling playing field. I'm for all about reducing red tape for small business.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to our next question from Sean Allen, and it will be directed at Danielle.
I'm interested in politics. You are clearly interested in politics. The folks watching this at home, 4 out of 10 of them didn't turn up to vote last time here. Voter turnout in the 2011 federal election recovered from the all-time low of 58.8% in 2008 to be just the 3rd lowest in Canadian history at 61.4%. I don't want to pigeonhole your answer by asking out any specific elements of electoral reform, but what can we do to fix voter apathy in Canada?
Thank you very much for the question. I think this is an excellent question made for the Liberal Party of Canada. When I was in Ottawa for candidate training, Justin Trudeau made an announcement, a 32-point plan for open and transparent government. And it was that day that I was confirmed in my belief as to why I was a Liberal, and this was the right move for Canada. People these days do not trust their politicians. They want to see them accountable, and I'd actually believe they want to be participating more in government. So our 32-point plan is going to reform how government works, from participation at the voting level all the way up to the Senate. When it comes to the Senate, it's in our Constitution. We have to keep it and make it work. Justin Trudeau's plan is something that I advocated publicly on my blog years ago, which is to create an independent body of experts to search Canada high and low for the best qualified people and for them to make the recommendations, much like the Supreme Court of Canada. When it comes to question period, you'll be required to answer the question more directly and be on topic. When it comes to voting and representing your constituency, only the Liberal Party of Canada is promising that if it's not a confidence motion, that you can actually represent, new idea out there, your ridings more so and speak for them. We're also going to change the way voting occurs. And if you vote for the Liberal Party of Canada, you'll never have to vote the same way first past the post again. What the next future of voting is going to look like, I can't tell you that. You're going to have to tell me that, because it's going to be up to you and people to put those ideas forward. If it's going to be another method that the NDP is proposing, that it was a method that was rejected in the province before, that's fine, we're open to it, but there are other ways out there, and we're going to have a youth advisory committee to the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Rob?
I don't know if restricting the public gets us anywhere in the mission to improve voter turnout. The reality is many voters, and we know this as candidates talking to them, that they're tired. They're tired of government. They're tired of lies. They're tired of dishonesty. One of the common things we get is my vote doesn't matter. And what we need to do as candidates is to encourage people that, yes, your vote does matter. When you don't vote, you're saying you're happy the way it is. And truly, who's happy the way it is? So your vote really does matter on an individual basis, on a local level. It helps strategic positioning of different parties. On a provincial level, helps shape that as well. So your vote really does matter, and to get involved into politics. I think one of the things I like to see is people get excited. When recently I spoke to an elderly lady who has never voted in her life, can't trust politicians. After I left, her son had called me and said, for the first time in her life, my 67-year-old grandmother will cast her ballot for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on then to Phil.
Thank you. There's much cynicism and apathy in the voting public. There's no question about that. Now, how do we go about tackling that in a way that we increase voter turnout and get people to really do the most important thing that guarantees a free, modern, tolerant, pluralistic, democratic society that we enjoy in Canada, the best country in the world on those measures? One of the efforts was through one of my parliamentarian colleagues, Michael Chong. And Michael Chong introduced some reforms to the House of Commons on a private member's bill. The private member's bill was debated, and all sides had input into some of the things that go into that. And it did pass. It passed through the Senate just before the House closed. And so that's one small, tiny step in the right direction. We also must, in our own communities, be responsible for the message we deliver as politicians. I like to think of myself as quite an independent politician, somewhat being able to work across the aisle. I presented a motion to help assist people with disabilities find work. It got support from all three parties. We need more of that. We need the public to see that. We need the public to see the kind of ecosystem I talked about locally, and we need to see that there's a message of hope. But I will be quite frank about this. The media tends to carry the stories that are cynical and that draw people down who go into politics. I often reflect on the question of why you went into politics, because many of my peers in business and through the years have said, that's something I'd never do. I'd never do that. We need to encourage positive, talented people to take up the mantle, represent this country, and keep it great.
Thank you. And Marc?
I think we need to answer the questions that are asked of us. You asked about voter reform, and I think mixed member proportional representation is something that will actually create action on the things that the other candidates have been speaking about. It would cause folks to work together. It would actually have regional representatives as well as your sort of regional MPs that will create competition with constituency offices. I think that's a wonderful idea, so that you're not stuck with one constituency office for 4 years. There's competition. If it works in the market, it should work in government as well, instead of having that hold on folks. I think part of the reason the cynicism that we've seen, though, is because we've had 148 years of two parties holding all the power, waiting for one party or another to get scandals or screw-ups or whatever it might be, to be voted out so somebody else can be voted in. I think we do too much voting out and not enough voting in. People are disengaged. And I honestly believe that if we were to elect an NDP federal government, even if it's a minority government, even if it's for 2.5 years, I think that'll actually smarten up the other parties. I think they'll sit there and say, wow, we can't just wait. We can't just wait it out anymore. We're going to have an option, a real option for actual change. I've been lucky enough to be endorsed by a fellow named Marshall Gans, who worked with Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy and many other people. And he endorsed my style of politics here because it is one that is about community development. You won't see big flashy ads from me. I'm not that type of person. I don't spend as much as the other parties will spend. Even if I had the option to, I wouldn't. I don't hold expensive fundraisers. I don't think you should have to pay to access politicians. You already pay taxes. But I do think we need more of that straight talk, more of a community development style, and I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see a little bit of less partisanship in our community. Now we need to have that sort of less partisanship in our House of Government, and there is a way to do that with mixed member proportional representation. I proudly support it.
Thank you. And we will go now to Michael Allan, and the question will be directed to Rob.
Farmers and other rural dwellers want a natural gas network that gives them a cheaper form of energy. Natural gas pipelines run right through rural areas, straight to cities where the gas is distributed according to a street grid. The need to expand the network for more infrastructure has been pushed by organizations as diverse as the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, the Ontario Good Roads Association, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. What would you and your party do to facilitate an expansion of the natural gas network in rural areas?
It's a good question, and thank you for that question. Libertarians, one of our fundamental planks is property rights. So therefore, I can't endorse any pipelines on private property enforced. I think that surely the issue of public safety on our roads is another concern, but that could be mandated provincially within the scope of provincial government. And again, through municipal government. These are already tiers there. So, federally, I don't see a pipeline actually working. I think that the risk when we compare a pipeline versus trains or trucks right now, there's really no comparison for data. When we look at accidents on the road or accidents from one train line, typically there's no increased or significant difference between that and what would be a risk with a pipeline. So again, to interfere in property rights, I can't support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Natural gas is one of those wonderful resources that Canada has in abundance. And we have many other natural resources in abundance. But this comes down to a debate about how we extend pipelines and how we do that in balance with as Rob has said, with property rights of individuals, but also the balance of the public discussion that goes on. Certainly farmers could benefit greatly by the extension of natural gas pipelines. There's no question about that. Our government has supported a pipeline that extends to the west coast of Canada to liquefy natural gas, to sell it through free trade agreements to the rest of the world, which would be a huge boom in our resource industry, and it would be a huge boom for Canadians in terms of tax revenue. But there's a large discussion in this country going on about fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels. And those fossil fuels, as we've seen with the drop in price in oil, has meant a great reduction in the type of programs that provinces and the federal government, frankly, have been able to deliver. We have been able to balance the budget, but the whole debate around fossil fuels, which natural gas is, it's a product of fossil fuels. So I know when I participated in debates in the House of Commons on these very subject matters, both opposition parties have voted against the extension, and in this case, the extension that would help our rural farmers right here in Brant.
Thank you. Marc.
Thank you. If a natural gas network was to meet with the rigorous and thorough environmental assessment, if it was to meet the standard of community consultation and consent, if that was there, and if it makes good economic sense, then that's something we should pursue. But in your question, there are issues there that I don't know that those would necessarily be met. That's why we need good, well-managed processes that'll actually make sure that people are heard, that we don't see what we have seen. And what we have seen under many, many years of Stephen Harper government are a lot of issues when it comes to protecting our waterways, removing the federal protections from millions of lakes and rivers. That's wrong-headed, and actually it's costly. We've seen issues around consent. I mean, if you like the environment, you're suddenly a radical. Well, I guess I'm a radical because I like the environment. And we're actually seeing that, not a foot of new pipeline has been created. We've seen a huge push from the Liberals and Conservatives around the Keystone Pipeline, which the Americans don't want to see. We don't want to see it. It would actually export 40,000 jobs to the U.S., and we want to see those jobs created here in Canada. But when we're talking about farmers and that rural piece, it would have to meet with the criteria I mentioned. Again, thorough environmental assessment, one that people actually trust, community consultation, and consent. So it can't just be a couple of town hall meetings. We need the consent there. And it has to make good economic sense. If it does, we're open. If it doesn't, then we aren't. And that's why processes are so important, so that these aren't judged and created based on whims or based on the government of the day's ideals. What it needs to be is something that makes sense in a long term. And that's what this election is about, making long-term sense.
Thank you. Danielle.
Thank you. I know the Ontario Federation of Agriculture has been working very hard to advocate for this, especially at my familiarity at a provincial level of government. And the Liberal Party also acknowledges that we are a very resource-rich nation and that our resources can be used as a source of productivity. It is a source of job creation, and natural resources recognize the importance of what our country is founded on, as long as it is done in a responsible manner. We have repeatedly called on the Harper Conservative government for oil and gas regulations, and there has not been any of those regulations. If a Liberal government were to be in there, we would create those regulations with the consultation of the farmers, but also when a proposition like this comes along, you also need the involvement of municipalities, the provinces, and also First Nations in this. We also need evidence-based research. And again, we are not opposed to it as long as that science and research, which has been missing from this government for so long, is actually invested. And we are prepared to put the money into that to create those infrastructures such as a pipeline. If it delivers it properly, we trust in our skilled jobs. We trust in the welders and whatnot who can build it. And we trust that it's there for the benefit of everybody to use if it's done properly.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to a question from Allan Lovett, and you will direct that to Phil.
Thanks, Colleen. I'd like to ask a little bit about access to capital, which is a very important piece of all business, from small business level right to large business. Access to capital is crucial for growth of business, for increasing jobs, for increasing product, and getting product to market both here and abroad. We believe that there are a number of steps that can be taken to give a more friendly regulatory system that can help bring capital to our local businesses. Will your party commit to any specific strategies, for example, introducing better tax incentives for venture capitalists, opening up regulations so that insurance companies and pension plans can invest venture capital into small, medium, and large-sized businesses, reviewing, reforming the tax system generally, or even modifying the capital cost allowance?
Thank you for that question. Yes, and that's what our government has been doing, working on all those fronts. But another front that is equally as important to this are the free trade agreements, the 38 free trade agreements that we've been able to negotiate around the world, and the TPP agreement. And let me weave back into here how those are so important, because there are a lot of foreign investors in those countries who do not look to Canada because we lack free trade agreements. Free trade agreements provide certainty. Capital flows to certainty. It flows to where there is a return, and the investor can reduce risk by knowing the certainty. Now, in the case of mutual funds and other traditional forms of funding, there has to be this balance between risky investment and investment that pays solid, constant, keeps pension funds afloat. And so we have to continue to regulate that. That's one of the reasons why Canada has had for, I believe, well over 7 years, noted the best banking system in the world, is because we keep certain regulations in place. But let me tell you what free trade will do. It'll free up capital around the world to come to this country. It will bring investment into this country, and we've already started to see it here in town. I know in Paris, a company that just arrived named Andritz Hydro, and they're a German company. They have one other branch plant in Canada, in Montreal. They're now in Paris, Ontario. They're employing about 120 people at this point, with great anticipation to expand their product line and to grow their Paris operations. And so these are the kinds of investments we need. The traditional things of traditional financing are always going to be in place for business. We need to increase that kind of investment that is called angel investment, and it helps companies get off the ground.
Thank you. Marc.
Thanks for the question, Allan. And yeah, absolutely, we're open to those discussions, but I have to challenge something on the Conservative record when it comes to trade. We have seen actually a $70 billion swing in the opposite direction when it comes to trade, despite these trade deals being opened up. Now, I'm not against all trade. I think fair trade is a wonderful thing. And the NDP has supported some of the trade agreements when it's with ethical actors and countries that utilize an environmental and ethical way of dealing with their workers and their land, which helps keep us competitive. But these Conservatives have been really bad negotiators when it comes to these free trade agreements. We've gone from a $50 billion surplus in trade to a $17 billion trade deficit. That is not helping our economy. And that's why we need stronger negotiators at those tables. So when we talk about opening up regulations or the tax incentives, this is exactly what we're talking about when we in the NDP discuss tax incentives, is tying the incentive to something. Nobody gives their kid an allowance for nothing, right? You have to actually see the work that they do. Well, maybe Sean Allan does, but I don't know. Anyhow, you have to see the work that they're doing, and we want to tie tax incentives to things that make sense for our communities, with job creation, innovation, and productivity as examples. We've actually heard some things about the TPP that we're not sure about. I'm not going to comment yes or no on the TPP until I've actually read the entire agreement. But we have, in this election, had wonderful announcements around the auto sector, and making sure that we have an auto sector strategy, a tourism strategy, and an aerospace strategy to help with those industries when they need it, and they need it now.
Thank you. Danielle.
Thank you. I think this fits in very nicely with our historic investment of $165 billion over the next 10 years, several billion of that, again, over the next 2 years to be invested immediately to kickstart the economy. But in that plan, we have several proposals that small and medium-sized businesses, as well as larger corporations, can take advantage of in order to attract the needed investments to do what we want to do to grow our economy. The number one thing we're going to do, first of all, is create a Building Canada Fund that can help with the facilitation of what's needed and loans. We are going to transfer uncommitted money to municipalities, and we're also going to invest the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, which is going to provide low-cost financing to build new infrastructure projects. And it's going to work in partnership with other levels of government and the financial community specifically, so I hope the Chamber would participate, and that the federal government can use its strong credit rating and lending authority to make it easier and more affordable for municipalities to better finance the broad range of infrastructure projects that those communities need. Lending from the Canadian Infrastructure Bank will be linked to the balance sheet assets and will not require any increase in the federal government's accumulated deficit. We are also going to, as part of this plan, invest into green bonds, which will offer loan guarantees to reduce financing. Again, when it comes to free trade and the trade deals that Canada has got itself into, I want to ask what's happened to the wheat board, the CBC that's under threat of being privatized under the TPT, and have farmers been sold out abroad?
Thank you very much. And Rob?
It's an age-old question, handouts versus hand-ups. We're quick to give millions of dollars to companies that are worth millions of dollars. Businesses, whether they be small, medium, or large, should actually be free to sell what they want, to who they want, at what time they want, at what price they want. Let the open market dictate the price through sales. When we look at some of the strangles of small business, one of the strongest things we see is government on the back of small business. How does a small business or a medium-sized business compete when a big corporation gets corporate welfare? By ending corporate welfare, we can actually encourage and allow small business to actually compete. This actually provides that hand up that small and medium-sized businesses are looking for. When we look at giving all these millions of dollars away, this is where your tax dollars are going. It's not their money, it's your money, and we should be able to freely choose how to spend our money, in what market and at what businesses. Maybe you're a vegetarian and you don't want your tax dollars going to the meat farmers. Maybe you want to put it somewhere else. So again, it's a personal choice thing, and not one group should benefit over another. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn now to Sean Allan and for his question, and you will direct it to Marc.
Well, yeah. No, do I get a rebuttal? I was mentioned by name.
No, the moderator is saying no.
But to be clear, I do make her work for it. Check your Brant News this week. Audrey filled in for Stacey Ferrant, the Brantford diva. So it's quite funny, actually.
Child labor laws, we're going to be
I'm spent a lot of time crafting these questions, but I'm not hearing enough local, so I'm going to keep this really simple with this one. You guys have been knocking on a lot of doors. We keep hearing about that whenever we ask you about how the campaign is going for stories in the paper. If you had to pick one locally specific issue that you're hearing the most about, what is it, and what are you telling people about how to fix it?
The local issue I hear the most about isn't necessarily a federal issue, but there are federal components to it, and that's temporary work. It's temp agencies. I was at the studio several years ago, and there was a person who happened to be a Liberal interviewing me about something and said, you know, Marc, this isn't the lunch bucket union town of Derek Blackburn. I said, nope, my union takes about $35 cents an hour out of my pay. Temp agencies take $5 to $7. It's a major issue, and there are over 100 temp agencies active in this community. There are the 10 or 12 you see, but there are others with ownership out of town also working here on contracts and bringing people in. And it creates massive issues for people who are already struggling, already have affordability issues at play. So when it comes to the federal side of things, I think there are a few things we can do. I think our federal minimum wage, while it only affects 100,000 or so workers, and it's not federal workers, as Mr. McColeman has said in a past debate, and as Rob said today, it's federally regulated industries, so that's people who work at banks, for example, definitely not government workers only. That'll help price out some of that, and it's also a signal to the provinces that they may do the same. Rachel Notley's doing the same when it comes to Alberta. That's one. I think we need to tie our tax breaks for companies and corporations to something specific, and I think things like permanent work instead of precarious, temporary, part-time, low-wage work is an example. I was lucky enough to have Tom Mulcair here. We went to Hartman's, a wonderful, wonderful community. and wonderful, wonderful business that hires a living wage, that doesn't hire a temp. Instead, they hire a couple extra people throughout the year, that are thriving, that are one of the most successful Hartmann's facilities in the entire world. And they work with their workers on that. People don't want to leave. There's a cost to leaving. And the other thing I think we need to do is make sure that when it comes to federal grants and loans, that companies disclose the percentage of temporary workers they utilize so that we can help make decisions about where that money is going to go.
Thank you very much. Danielle.
The number one thing that I hear at the door is that they want a change in government, and they're ready for a change in government. And I'll be very honest with you right now that they are weighing their options between what government or what party they're going to do that for. And I think in Ontario, it's really looking at the Liberals are where it's going to be. Those are all the polls are saying that here for our province of Ontario. But the second thing, locally, if you want it specifically for the riding, is youth jobs. I had a family member of mine, which I won't name or whatnot because there's a stigma attached to it. And the problem is, as Marc mentioned, is the temp agencies. He has a university degree, and after university, worked in 4 different temp jobs to find something, and now has to commute outside of the city, which he didn't want to do for a job. But the solution for that is what the Liberal Party is offering. And a Liberal government is offering $1.3 billion over 3 years, starting after we get elected, which is 13 times more than the number that the NDP is offering for jobs investment. We predict that that investment is going to create 40,000 youth jobs for each year over the next 3 years. And that's an annual investment of $300 million. Now, where is that money going to go to help people and young people find jobs that these parents want and these kids want? They do want to work. It's going to increase the number of jobs funded by the Canada Summer Jobs Program by 35,000 each year. It is more than double the almost 11,000 Canadians who can access Skills Link every year. And we'll invest $40 million annually to create more co-op placements for high school and college students. And there's a lot more. It was a huge investment, and I really think that the university students and college students will find that very exciting.
Thank you. Rob.
I tend to agree that one of the biggest issues that is brought up to us is temps. And again, higher minimum wage goes, the more government restrictions actually fosters and fuels and creates temps. Small businesses have a choice. Do we let people go? Do we raise our price? Do we negotiate with benefits? How do we offset some of this cost? And a lot of them come back to temps. So one contributes to the other. Government doesn't create jobs. Businesses create jobs. If government created jobs, if you listen to them, if government created jobs, everyone would have one. Government doesn't create jobs. Businesses do. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phil.
The single biggest issue locally is taxes. I talked more about people on their porch, in their driveway, about their total tax burden that they face. And it's not just the federal level of taxes. It's the municipal level of taxes, the provincial level of taxes, and the federal level of taxes. So it's often a discussion where people don't know the distinctions between where revenue or tax they pay their taxes, but they talk about their tax load being very, very high in a cumulative sense. And of course, you know, the always the ongoing line about there's only one taxpayer is so true. So our government has made it a focus and will continue to make it a focus to make sure the tax load from the federal level is low. Right now, it's the lowest it's been in 50 years. The average family, this would be a family of 4, $60,000 a year, 2 people working income, are paying $6,600 less taxes since we took government in 2006. We will continue to do this while balancing budgets because we can find efficiencies within government that haven't been examined for years and years. We've already done it. We just balanced the budget. The financial statements came in, audited financial statements of the federal government. We're $5 billion in surplus right now for the past fiscal year. We're running a surplus this year, so the books are balanced. That gives us room to continue to make sure the tax load, for not only for corporations but for individual members of families, can continue to be worked on to be reduced. We're the government that reduced the HST, or at the time the GST, from 7% to 5%. We'll continue to take initiatives like that to make life more money, put more money back into the pockets of the Brantford and Brant taxpayers.
Thank you, Phil.
We get the rebut him on his minimum wage. It was not. We wanted to
No.
answer the question. No, okay.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to question number 10, and Michael, Allan, Marion. And you'll be directing it to Danielle.
Okay. Aboriginal leaders say there is a pressing need for a commitment from the federal government to a new accord with First Nations that reflects the 94 recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. The redress sought is more than addressing the enduring social ills from more than a century of the residential school system and its attempt at what is now called cultural genocide. Provinces and municipalities are responding to the spirit of the report, but all parties are waiting for a response from Ottawa with a comprehensive action plan. Given the proximity of the Mohawk Institute Residential School in Brantford and the history of lingering ills it spawned, it is worth asking, what would you and your party do to get the federal government to join the reconciliation?
On August 21st, it was very easy for me to remember because it was my dad's birthday and the one-year anniversary of my nomination. But former Prime Minister Paul Martin came to engage with the Six Nations and New Credit. And it was a great informative day for all parties involved, including the public, which was invited to the town hall. And at that town hall, the director of Woodland Cultural Center said that prior to that day that no politician or would-be politician had ever engaged with them on that level before. And it was a humbling experience. I grew up across from the residential school. And as I said then, for me, it was always just something that we would go in February for the snow snake, and you never really knew what was going on there. When it comes to the Truth and Reconciliation report, as it's been said widely, the truth has been heard, now the reconciliation has to begin. And I'm very proud to say that Justin Trudeau has committed to all recommendations in that report, no matter how hard they be. It is not just simply a matter of making an apology. I was there actually in the House of Commons for that day of the apology. And yes, that was a historic day, but there's been a lot of divide since then, again, going steps backwards since the days of Paul Martin of 10 years ago as to the progress that we would have made. We are committed to reopening negotiations again for Kelowna, and we are going to have First Nations communities as partners, make those terms as equal partners, that any future relationship is done in full cooperation. And I think that that will be a great beginning for a future relationship that will have a trickle-down effect for other things we discussed, such as land claims.
Thank you. Rob?
Again, it's a different table of resolution. It's not quite exactly land claims, but again, it's a native issue, and we really need to work with all parties in order to have resolution, whether it be discrimination or land claims or better services for our natives. We really need to be at that table, all levels of government. Now, the other part of this question is about education. It just proves the libertarian philosophy of education. Government has failed to grade. And I know that the question wasn't directly associated with education, but it does prove that education should be left out of the hands of government. When we look at Aboriginal schools or blind schools or current schools and curriculum, there's continued problems, and all those problems are created by government. Problems in society caused by government can't be fixed by yet more government. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Phil?
Well, let's call it what it was. It was one of the, if not the most, one of the most horrific chapters in Canadian history, residential schools. Our government recognized it. Our Prime Minister delivered the formal apology on the behalf of all Canadians to Aboriginals and First Nations people in the House of Commons, and then went further to initiate the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which carried out its work. Now we have a list of recommendations. It's not widely known that the full report has not been tabled in the House of Commons. So the full report will be tabled in the next government. And so when that report is tabled, and why our government has said when that report is tabled, we will evaluate all of the recommendations against the full report, instead of just saying, yes, all the recommendations go forward at this point because they are presented as recommendations. We need the full report. We need the over 2 years of work of the Reconciliation Committee to move forward. But let me just say this, my observation in having been at the table in Ottawa on various issues for 7 years, and that is this. The best way we can help Aboriginal, we can empathize and we can help overcome the hurt and pain, and we must understand that there is true hurt and pain at the core of some of the individuals who were affected by this, and has created a big social downside in many cases. But we must help people move beyond that. We must help them move to seeing themselves and their self-image in light of the opportunities that exist before them. And so one of the initiatives that I believe we can do, and we need to continue, there's much work to be done on this file, but what we can continue to do is help them build their own local economies, help them grow, help them get the best of training that's possible for people, and help them at the same time overcome those past horrific events.
Thank you, Phil. Marc.
Words matter, but so do actions. And it's with that we have to take action. However, it's not up to the people here to decide what's the appropriate action and what time and when. I believe that we need to sit with First Nations leadership when the report is tabled in the House of Commons. We already do know several of the 94 recommendations, and we need to go line by line and prioritize with First Nations. Not us deciding what we will do to help them and them deciding that they might have other plans. We need to actually work arm in arm, nation to nation on this. When it comes to the Save the Evidence campaign, the former residential school, this idea of a museum of conscience is really, really an important and valuable one. I've been lucky enough to walk through that school, former school site, with Romeo Saganash, an NDP MP, whose brother was actually a resident at the Mohawk Institute, and it was a difficult but worthwhile walk. I've been lucky enough to be a member of the Brantford Sunrise Rotary, and I was one of the many who voted to donate $35,000 towards the changing of that site into one of a museum of conscience to let folks know across Canada and across the world about this time in our history, and also to be at the edge of the best practices for healing. And I've been lucky enough to be a facilitator of the Kije Anishinaabe Nin program, which is a kind man program that deals with a lot of the hurt and the pain of the abuse that happened and the intergenerational conflict and violence that's happened ever since. These are important things to understand in our community. And I think our community is going to rally together on this one with Six Nations, with New Credit, with Brantford and Brant County, and with the federal and provincial governments. And it's important that we do, because this issue is one that is important, but it's also one where we can do something to heal. And I'm really excited to be a part of that in whatever capacity when asked.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to Allan Lovett, and you're going to be directing your question to Rob.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about economic development, and I'm hoping I'm not rushing you, but I'd like to look at it at both kind of a micro and macro level. So firstly, locally, what will you, if elected, do to help bring economic development to our region in the way of successful companies that'll provide meaningful jobs to families here? On a bigger picture level, what strategies will your party commit to help drive the economic development not just to Canada but to our region? And one specific example I'd use is economic development funding. Not sure if you're aware or not, but the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario's budget, if you look at a per capita dollar figure, is about $17 a person. You compare that to many regions in Quebec, which for similar regions have over $37 a person. Perhaps leveling the playing field on that to help push economic development out in a meaningful way on an equal playing field throughout the country may help.
Again, it's one of these things that our flat tax program, 15% tax, pretty much end all other tax, puts more money into the pockets of the constituent, to the public, so they can actually spend more money. When they spend more money, it creates product and service demand. To meet that demand, businesses either have to be expanded or created to meet that demand. The other element is again, that corporate welfare. When we look at big corporations on the other side of the country getting tens of thousands of dollars of handout, but the local guy in Burford gets nothing. To me, that just makes sense to end that. And now that guy the local guy can compete for these national contracts, or national chains here locally. They don't have to have these big shipments coming in. The local farmer can, in order to meet that demand, he has to hire. So to me, this just makes sense where we get government out of the equation and allow simple economics to be simple economics. Another issue is cross provincial territorial trades. There's so much restriction. We need to end that so businesses can intertrade with other provinces with less red tape. We need to stimulate the spending habits and put more money into the public so they can spend more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Phil.
The first thing we can do is grow Ontario as a province to a have province, not a have-not province. The discrepancies you say in economic development dollars exists because an economic development agency such as FedDev, which is our more recent economic development branch, became necessary because of the decline of the Southern Ontario economy during the Great Recession that we went through. And so I would suggest to you that other parts of the country that have got more dollars in the past are historically get more dollars because they've been have-not areas. We've been a have-not for a number of years now in Ontario, and of course we're at the core. If you look at Brantford geographically, we're at the core, and we have a strong workforce here. The optimism I see is to continue to make targeted investments as we have done. I don't believe I've mentioned a company here locally that recently arrived called Green Mantra. Green Mantra's a company down on Elgin Street. They are taking waste plastics, basically bags, supermarket bags, bottles and such, and they're making industrial oils out of it. And so FedDev came in, offered them some assistance because they're not able to qualify for traditional financing. We have given them on 2 occasions loans to expand their business, and most recently they took a big contract, international contract for their industrial oils to be put into the aggregate that's going to make our roads, because we need these kinds of oils in the process of paving roads. I'll just say the last point that's critical to all of this is to expand the markets for companies. Free trade has been and will be, especially the European Free Trade Agreement, it quadruples the size of our marketplace.
Thank you. Marc.
I think the European Free Trade Agreement may be a good one, but if we're going to talk about companies, we should probably talk about the 35 plus companies that have closed down in the last 15 years in this community. The 3,800, I should say, manufacturing jobs that have left since Stephen Harper's become Prime Minister right here in Brantford-Brant, and the 1,000 general jobs that we lost in the last 6 months. And while I agree there is some room for optimism and there is some room for hope, we have to take credit where it's due, but also responsibility when it's due. And we also have to treat a community above policy. I'm not the most rigid New Democrat you'll ever meet. I look at making sure that I'll be the best salesperson this riding's ever seen, and always putting community above party. One of the things we need to do is I'd personally continue my strong relationship with the Chamber of Commerce and other business advocacy groups. But we've also announced some really good policies for this region, such as, again, an auto sector strategy, aerospace strategy, a tourism strategy, an innovation tax credit that'll help kickstart manufacturing. Meeting with you and others on the idea that I actually agree with Phil on this piece, and I'll give credit where it's due on that economic development formulas need to be rearranged to look at who is and who isn't a have-not province. But we also have to invest in education. One of the things the Chamber of Commerce has been pushing, and it's been somewhat ignored, is the idea that First Nations education, I'm talking about elementary and secondary education, is underfunded by quite a big amount. It's 70 cents on the dollar. for provincial school boards in comparison. And that's something that's going to create an issue as First Nations are actually the best growing birth rate in the country, and we live right next to one of the biggest reserves in the world and the biggest reserve in the country. We need to make sure that we equalize those education commitments so that kids from Six Nations become adults from Six Nations with great educational opportunities and become great parts of our workforce.
Thank you. Danielle.
I think you always have to be an ambassador for your community and sell it all the time. Not just sell it for people to invest into it, but also sell what it has here to promote what it has to offer and to sell the amazing people and products that it creates outside and for us to grow as a base, an economy. I myself have brought 2 companies into Brantford to take a look at all of our old empty buildings. Unfortunately, they decided to move elsewhere, but one of them was a salmon farm. They were going to transform the buildings into a fish farm, mass scale, and the other one was actually a military company that was going to build here. And for other known reasons, they decided to go elsewhere. But also I've been dealing a lot with the grain farmers and different agricultural communities. I don't know if many people realize this, but agriculture is still our city's #1 industry, and we have to go back, I think, to using what our economy was strongly based on and what it's actually still good for. We have a huge rural base here and a lot of great farmers who are doing things. The grain farmers of Ontario are currently looking for a grain sorting facility, and I would love to see that they decide that they invest that here into our county. It's something that is needed across the country, and it would be great to have here in the backyard of where Massey once used to be. Also, Laurier has some amazing programs, the Laurier LEAP program. These are programs that are growing. Laurier is a campus that is growing recently with the Lizardius School that is going to have cross programs here as well. We also need to start looking at our community as, I think it's already going to that way because I see it advertised in the Toronto Sun as a bedroom community of Toronto. And build on transit to be a GTHA community, and green technology could be huge for the county as well.
Thank you. Thank you. We are going to move to our next question from Sean Allan, and we will be starting with, I believe, Phil.
I'll get back on script here because our last question ended up stealing Michael Allan's next one. So, although he's been furiously writing another one, so you're good. Don't worry. Although the number of households decreased from 2012 to 2014, still 8.3% of households in Brantford-Brant are considered to have food security issues, which means at some point during the previous 12 months to this Roundtable on Poverty survey, they worried about having enough to eat. Need another number. 2,800 individuals use the Brantford Food Bank each month. Do policy initiatives to consider these empty bellies need to come from the top? If so, what are we going to do about it?
This is an unacceptable situation. That in this great country, we have individuals, and it's not just our community, it's other individuals who may go without food. One of the initiatives I've personally taken locally is to raise and get people to donate to the food bank in the general collection realm, but also for my shred days, we bring in on average 600-700 pounds of food for the food bank. The food bank is near and dear to my heart when it comes to this community. This talks about the fact that people need the opportunities for training. They need the opportunities to do whatever they can at their level to become part and productive people in the workforce. And we must focus on the needs of the people who are living in such conditions that they cannot get food and give them the hand up that they need to be able to not only gain food, but gain a good deal of self-respect by having a meaningful job, by going to work every day, by having that fulfillment of what it means to work. And so inevitably, they will be contributors back to the ones who may be in need afterwards. But listen, we have wonderful resources all around us that are untapped, that need to be tapped at the local level. The advocacy that I would undertake and continue to undertake at that level, and I see it more with persons with disabilities who sometimes don't have the ability to get out and do the things that they need to do. We need to take care of those truly needy people. This has been one of my passions on Parliament Hill as chair of the Human Relations, Skills and Social Development Standing Committee, and the Persons and Status of Persons with Disability. I will continue that role to advocate passionately for this community in Ottawa.
Thank you. Marc.
And this is why affordability matters. The other parties have made fun of me and my party in the past for wanting to do things like cap ATM fees. Well, when you're somebody who doesn't have access to your bank at regular hours because of a poverty situation, a lack of transport, and the rest of it, that $3 fee at your convenience store plus the $1.50 from your own bank, that's a loaf of bread and then some. And the same thing with transit. I was happy to be one of the founders of the Brantford-Brant Roundtable on Poverty. We worked on things like community gardens with First Nations and non-native folks, settler folks, to try and make sure that there was some sustainable local food development in town. We donated thousands of pounds of food to the food bank from that. It's systemic change that needs to happen. There are now over 40 of these community gardens in town that do that work, and that is sustainable. That is community driven. Sean, I'm going to throw some other statistics at you. The top 2 growing segments of the food bank usage are people who work full time, and again, that's because of things like poor wages and temporary work, and seniors because of a lack of pension security, right? It used to not be one of those things where if you worked full time, you didn't need to use the food bank. And now working full time is not a guarantee you will not be poor. And it's an issue. I've been on the cutting edge with Canada Without Poverty, a group I've worked with, where we've looked at transportation systems that'll help hire people in rural areas locally. So folks who are on assistance, let's say, in one part of the community can actually get a job bus, and that bus will take care of their transportation so that they can work in agriculture, which is a wonderful, wonderful resource we have here. Instead of hiring temporary foreign workers, we can have local people doing that work. But it's the kind of work you can't afford to do if you also need to have a car, gas, insurance, and the rest of it in a very unaffordable way. These are important steps to make systemic change happen, to help people who are working hard get what they need to move ahead.
Thank you. Danielle.
It's not a situation to blame for anybody. No one is at fault for the situations that they're in. We all want to help one another, and our society is one of helping. People want to work, and they want to be able to provide for themselves. Our country was built as a country of a social safety net to help provide for people. And I fear that under Stephen Harper, our country has been starting to look after more of the wealthy people than the people who actually need the care and investment that we used to be able to offer so much better. When the GST was cut from 7 to 5%, I don't think people who bought a coffee realized that extra 2 cents. The people who felt that cut were the wealthy millionaires who were making the big purchases and saving the 2% GST on those big purchases. Nobody minds paying taxes, but they want to know that they're being spent to those who need it and that they're being spent properly. We need a country that, again, is funding healthcare sufficiently. We need a country and a party that is going to invest in affordable housing, childcare places, seniors, taking care of its seniors and its Aboriginal and its youth. We are the only party out there that is going to tax the wealthy, and we are going to do that by adding on a new tax bracket. I encourage you all to go to liberal.ca/fairness to look at this. And we're adding on a new tax bracket that anybody who's earning over $200,000 will be placed into, that income will be placed into a new tax bracket, paying 4% more. And as a result, we're going to lower the taxes on people who are earning between $45,000 and $90,000. We are also going to raise the amount of child benefits. We're going to lift 315,000 kids out of poverty. And that's why we need the Liberal Party.
Thank you. Rob.
Same kind of answers I've said before. Again, the cost goes up, and we need to really lower the cost of living. One of the things that I've looked at recently is political parties receive the most return for a donation. It's around 75% for the first $400. But if you donate a $400 to like the food bank, you barely get 18% back. If you donate to a nonprofit group, by simply flip-flopping them, we'll encourage people to donate where the money is needed. In these kind of situations, the food bank, social programming, special needs, it allows a hand up rather than a handout. When I said we would end federal tax, what I meant to say is we would end federal tax. There'll still be provincial and some municipal tax. Introduce a flat tax of 15%, raising the percent from from 11,000 to 17,300. That allows the working poor to actually be tax exempt as well. So, to me, it's really about lowering the cost of living, and that's key and paramount. By ending all other federal tax, think about that. That means groceries goes down. That means spending your fuel goes down. All your purchases will go down in price. It puts that money directly back into your pocket. Or you can vote for these guys and give it to them. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going on to our final question, and just a reminder, there's no reference to written material, so we're going to go on, and it will be Michael Allen who will be forwarding this to Marc.
As we all know around here, the Brantford area is one of the mid-sized city communities in Ontario that have suffered from deindustrialization that has led to factory closings and job losses. Now, a number of companies have been settling in the area. However, the deindustrialization still is a drag on economic progress. What would your party do to invest in a new industrial strategy suitable for Brantford and other communities in Ontario?
Thank you, Michael Allen. What we're looking at is an innovation tax credit, and I think it's very important. This will help factories and manufacturers that are doing the hard work of laying down roots here and innovating. We also want to give a hiring credit for those who hire good jobs that you can actually raise a family on. And that's unfortunately what we've seen the opposite from over the last 10 years. We've seen, again, 3,800 manufacturing jobs leaving this area. And we've seen 1,000 general jobs gone in the last 6 weeks, and that's last 6 months, and that's according to Stats Canada. That's not me researching that. That's Stats Canada. We're very trusted on these issues. What we need to do is make sure that we stay competitive. Yeah, we're going to raise corporate taxes, but we're going to keep them below the average. Stephen Harper's had them. And you have to remember that these were at 38% not that long ago, and now they're down to 15. By raising it to 17, we can invest where we need to on infrastructure in a long-term stable way to let organizations and companies know that Canada's a great place to invest, that your roads and your bridges will be there, in affordable childcare so that folks can join the workforce and be productive members of society in the working world if they choose to. And that actually helps women as well, because women are often having to make really tough decisions around parenting or working, and later on in life they're often more likely to be vulnerable financially because of many years of having to stay at home. We have the auto sector strategy that I've brought up several times. We have manufacturing strategies, we have aerospace strategies, and we have tourism strategies that will all help to make sure that these organizations and these sectors are given a fair shake. And that's really good for Ontario, because Ontario has become a have-not province over the last several years of federal conservatives and provincial liberals. And we need to make sure that we have the most competitive and fair province in the country.
Thank you. Danielle.
Well, again, it's going to go back to our historic promise of an investment of $125 billion, which is, again, received very well by councillors and mayors, including of this community as well, for the needed, what they identify as a need for this economy the day after that the election is announced as to who is the winner. If we are going to be forming government, we are going to make those investments to get the economy moving. Again, now is the time to invest when interest rates are low, and we are committed to a balanced budget, but we need to get people back working again and get people educated to fill those jobs that are needed. This is what economists are calling for. This $125 billion investment is in three parts. One is for public transit, which again we've highlighted again tonight several times, social infrastructure, affordable housing, and childcare, which our community needs, and green infrastructure, which has a lot of potential in this community and in our country that we can also export around the world. The other thing we're going to do is invest in skilled trades. We're going to invest $750 million. This will give $500 million into the increased funding to the labor market development agreements, and $200 million increase to the funding delivered by the provinces and territories into skilled work. I'm also going to go back to, again, we do not want to raise corporate taxes and scare companies away. It's at least 150,000 jobs that could be lost with raising those corporate taxes. Liberals are actually friendly to businesses, and we want to see those businesses stay and grow. And with our plan of investing, we will have a growth economy that we can all live on in the future.
Thank you. Rob?
Over-regulating, overtaxing hurts businesses and the community. We need to encourage and foster an open market where businesses can thrive through their sales, through the sales where the public can actually purchase that without government intervention. When government over-regulates, it actually hurts the business a lot more than that. I said it earlier, the bigger parties here talk about subsidies and giving money out. Again, they'll take $1 from you and give 35 cents to the business or to the employee and say, hey, you're better off with this 35 cents. The Libertarians think you should keep the $1 to begin with. You'd be better off then. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phil?
Well, let me give you some actual statistics locally that are very, very encouraging. And the first statistic I'm going to give you, because when we did one of the debates earlier, we knew we were going in to talk about the building industry in town. And what was really surprising when I did the research on this over the last year, and in particular over the last number of months, is the number of new industrial building permits that have been taken out at the City of Brantford. They have gone literally from 4 to 38 in numbers. The dollar figures have gone somewhere in the $100,000 range, up now to nearly $20 million in industrial investment in buildings. That's a signal that companies are coming here, that they're either leasing space from people who build these buildings or they're building a specialty building of their own. If you take the Workforce Planning Board's numbers in terms of their employer surveys, they survey over 200 people and they publish the results. I believe Jill Halleck, who's the executive director there, has said that 80% of the companies that they were surveyed will be hiring over the next 2 years. Now that data goes back about 6 months. So over the next 2 years, 6 months ago until the end of 2016, 80% of the companies in Brantford are hiring. So let's explain, that's the local landscape, but let's explain the larger landscape. The way you attract and keep manufacturing jobs in country is you make the environment competitive for industrial companies to be here. That's what they come for. They come because Canada offers them a quality of life and advantages that they can't get south of the border or any other district in Canada. Those are, again, taxes, training, and all of the infrastructure that we can provide them to have success and guarantee their success right here in Canada.
Thank you very much, Phil. Well, that was our final question. And I must comment that you kept to your time frame pretty well. A few little talkovers, but that's acceptable. So that's all the time we have. The candidates will now make their closing remarks, and I remind you that you will be each allowed 1 minute. The candidates will speak in reverse order to the opening remarks. So our first candidate will be Rob Ferguson.
Thank you for having us today. It's always an opportunity, a great opportunity to appear on the ballot here in Brantford-Brant riding. What we need from a government is more of a hand up and less of a handout. The truth of the matter is a Libertarian government nationally may not happen, but a Libertarian MP, that is plausible. Think about it. I could go to Ottawa and fight for rights and freedoms. I would fight for lower tax and fight for the return personal liberties back to the individual. Government should be about protecting liberty and property, and we need a member who will do that. On October 19th, I ask you to support the Libertarian conspiracy theory, where we take over the government and leave you alone. Thank you.
Thank you. So Danielle Takacs.
Locally and across Ontario, Liberals are becoming the #1 choice for change. The other plans presented tonight call for austerity, status quo, and distant promises that rely on future elections. Will you be better off with that? Balanced budgets are important and achievable for the Liberal Party, but you have to invest in order to get a return. We have a plan to invest now in Laurier and Conestoga that will bring transit here, affordable housing for a community that desperately needs it, and provide a fresh, positive partnership with First Nations. This is not future thinking. These are plans developed in our communities, ready to go. I want to inspire the younger generation and show that politics can be a force for good and that politicians can make positive differences in our lives. I don't make promises I can't deliver. I won't always have the answers, but I'll trust in you for your advice and knowledge if you trust in me and my knowledge of government, and I will fight for you every day.
Thank you. Marc Laferriere.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the organizers and for you watching at home. Change is hard work, and nobody's been doing that hard work longer or more often to create the kind of change we want to see. We're tired on the provincial level of liberal flip-flops, and we don't want to see more of that on the federal side. And we're also tired of conservative ethical issues. I do not support Bill C-51. I do not support raising the old age security eligibility to 67. I don't support EI benefit cuts. I don't support corporate welfare and temporary work agencies and precarious work that's killing our local economy. I do support lower prescription drug prices. I support increasing the old age supplement and a guaranteed income for seniors. I support EI being there to help people who need it. And I support not utilizing the EI fund as a balanced budget prop as Conservatives and Liberals have. I support my community ahead of my party. And I think it's important that if we're looking for change in this election, we look with the local change that makes the most sense. And that's Marc Laferriere on October 19th.
Thank you very much, Marc. And Phil McColeman.
After the collapse of our manufacturing sector in the 1990s, many will recall the national attention Brantford-Brant for all the wrong reasons. Photos of empty buildings, deteriorating downtown, and widespread social hardship. Today, we are seeing a lot of attention on Brantford-Brant, but when national organizations and media outlets come to town, it is to capture the story of a revitalized community that is building on the foundation of a future that is vibrant. We've emerged out of the challenge of a magnitude that some places never recover from, and it didn't happen by accident. Manufacturing and processing is rebounding with strength and strengthening our local economy. The downtown is being revitalized. Polluted and ignored sites like Mohawk Lake are being done. On Election Day, I am asking for your support so that I can continue delivering results for you and building on the success stories that this community is today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Whew. So I'd like to thank you candidates very much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening and for your commitment to our community and our country. Very important. And I know that you are here this evening because you're passionate, you're interested, and you want to make a difference. And that's very inspiring to all of us. I'm sure tonight's discussion will greatly assist the residents of Brant in making this very important decision on October 19th. I'd like to thank our panelists, Michael Allan Marion of the Expositor, Allan Lovett representing the Chamber of Commerce Brantford-Brant, and Sean Allen of the Brant News. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Rogers for partnering with our chamber to provide this opportunity for the residents and the business community. The debate will be rebroadcasted on Rogers Television numerous times leading up to the election, so you can watch it over and over and over again to prepare for your next debate. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Please, please, please exercise your right to vote on October the 19th. It's very important. Thank you and good evening.